Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, I'm sure you've seen this absurd story. Donald Trump is demanding that the Department of Justice, his Department of Justice, that he fully controls at this point, pay him $230 million, nearly $250 million in taxpayer money. Why? Well, he claims that, DOJ had the nerve to investigate crimes he was suspected of committing, among other things. As I recall, he ended up being indicted for some of those crimes. But he said, no. They had no right to do any of that. And they damaged me. They injured me to the tune of nearly $250 million. He actually has alleged that the FBI, the Department of Justice, federal prosecutors violated his privacy rights when they searched Mar-a-Lago. Friends, a federal judge reviewed the evidence, the affidavit, the application for a search warrant for Mar-a-Lago, and based on the evidence, the judge concluded there was probable cause to believe that evidence of crime would be located right then and there at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump's, residence/resort located in Palm Beach County, Florida. And indeed, there was evidence of crime found there. But Donald Trump tries to spin that like it's a violation of his privacy rights. This claim is absurd on its face, and there are 100 reasons why it shouldn't be paid out by the Department of Justice, by the federal government. But I wanted to sit down and talk with somebody who is intimately familiar not only with these circumstances, but with Palm Beach County, Florida itself, where Mar-a-Lago is located. So I sat down with my friend, former state's attorney for Palm Beach County for a dozen years, Dave Aronberg. And we discussed the ins and outs of this truly insane request that DOJ should pay Donald Trump $250 million for violating his privacy interests. I hope you enjoy this conversation with my friend, Dave Aronberg. See, I will give everybody a couple of minutes to jump on before I do the formal introduction of my friend Dave Aronberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County and a regular on Morning Joe. I have a feeling most of the folks who sign on to this Substack Live will instantly recognize Dave Aronberg, and we're going to talk about the bone I have to pick with him about just how frequently we see him on Morning Joe, but that we're going to get to that. I'm not going to give you a pass on any of that. Okay, we're getting some people joining us now. So let me launch into an introduction of Dave Aronberg. If I had more time, I could list all of his accomplishments, but I'm going to try to hit some of the highlights. Dave served in the Florida State Senate. And I believe at the time he was elected in 2002, he was the youngest member ever of the Florida State Senate. I guess you were about 14 when you first got elected. Is that right?
I was there was one younger, a guy named Robert Wexler, who became a congressman. But at the time, I was the youngest. I was 31. And yes, thank you for that, Glenn. I appreciate it.
And, you served, Dave served in the Florida State Senate, where I was looking at the bills that he worked on and that he sponsored, and it's really this incredible potpourri of justice that he was doing down there in Florida. I know that might not be what our viewers think of when they think about what's coming out of Florida these days, but he worked on bills involving attacking the opioid crisis. He worked on bills attacking gang violence. He worked on bills attacking sexual offenses against children. And importantly, he sponsored a bill to eliminate the statute of limitations. That is sort of the deadline or the timing out of the government's ability to bring criminal charges against people who were involved in child sex abuse. He successfully sponsored a bill that did away with the statute of limitations. So not unlike in murder cases, murder never times out. We could work a murder case from the 1940s or 50s or 60s or 70s because there's no statute of limitations. The same is now true in Florida, courtesy of a bill that Dave sponsored. After he left the Florida State Senate, he worked in, among other jobs, the drug czar position in, I believe, Pam Bondi's Attorney General's office. Maybe we'll touch on that a little bit. And then he was elected as Palm Beach County State's Attorney in 2012. He was sworn in 2013, and he served a full dozen years as the top prosecutor in Palm Beach County. And you all may know there's this little resort down there known as Mar-a-Lago that I believe was within your jurisdiction as state's attorney. Is that right, Dave?
That's correct.
Yeah. So listen, he has put in a quarter of a century as a public servant, both an elected official in the state Senate in Florida and then fighting crime in Florida for a full dozen years. So yes, he's a man after my own heart. And now that he has left government service, he continues to appear as a regular on Morning Joe. And here's the bone I have to pick with him. So I was on contract as a legal analyst with MSNBC for 6.5 years until I recently asked to be released from my contract so I could just work, completely independent as a legal analyst. And as somebody who was on contract to MSNBC, they would use me across all of the shows starting, way too early at 5 a.m. through Stephanie Rule at 11 p.m. And you would just kind of wait to see what show called you on any given day, and that was the show you'd go on. But one thing I noticed is that I didn't get a lot of calls from Morning Joe. And I wasn't quite sure why, but, every day I would turn Morning Joe on at, 6 a.m., and I would see Dave Ehrenberg as the legal analyst. I'm like, wait a minute. Hey, I'm the legal analyst here. I'm the guy on contract. But you know what? I learned so much from Dave's commentary. And obviously, all of this is a joke. I don't begrudge the fact that he was a regular and I couldn't even buy a hit on Morning Joe. But it was because they recognized his, deep well of experience in all things criminal law and all things political. His wisdom and his ability to communicate to everybody, which is, I think, one of the most important qualities in a legal analyst. You want to be able to translate everything from legalese to English so that it resonates with everybody. And that's what Dave does brilliantly. So with that introduction, let me say welcome to our friend, Dave Ehrenberg.
Glenn, it's such a pleasure to be here with you on this unique platform because you've been ahead of your time for a while. You left corporate media before it became passe. And then you've started, you went to Patreon and now you're on Substack. You're always like 2 steps ahead of everyone else. And here I am, I'm just starting on Substack and you've been really like a role model. So thank you for letting me take your spot on Morning Joe. But the day I start taking your spot on Substack, you'll already be broadcasting from Mars or something. You'll be like, you're always 2 steps ahead, my friend. And I think you landed on your feet. It's not like leaving Morning Joe cost you any money. I mean, I think you're doing quite well out there. You've got a huge following, and it's just an honor to be with you, brother.
Yeah, well, if you try to bump me off a Substack, there's going to be hell to pay. I'm just saying, Dave, because these are my people. We do our community meetings 8:30 p.m. Eastern time every night. I need it as much as my friends who join me live need it. So it's a great community. All right, so I turned on Morning Joe, I think it was last Wednesday, and I saw you talking about this absurd development. Now, when do we not have an absurd development to discuss when it comes to the Trump administration? But this really absurd development where Donald Trump is demanding nearly $250 million $230 million from the Department of Justice. Why? Because they had the temerity to investigate him for what sure looked like criminal activity. Indeed, he was indicted by multiple grand juries for his suspected crimes. And yet he is now claiming that somehow they violated his privacy rights and they investigated him for no reason. And he wants nearly $250 million of our taxpayer money to make him whole. Can you kind of just start wherever you want to start and talk about your view of this absurd notion that he can get to put in this claim against the federal government for $250 million for being investigated for his suspected crimes?
This is so absurd, Glenn, so egregious that even Trump himself acknowledged it by saying, well, I'm suing myself. It's kind of weird. And, I mean, he sort of knew that there was this inherent conflict, self-serving nature in this, but he's still doing it anyways. $230 million. Now, here's the biggest question. There are a lot of reasons to oppose this, but number one, which is really not being discussed that much, is didn't his supporters pay for all of his legal fees and expenses? They had a $250 million PAC that they raised. Stop the steal. And they donated money, and it was diverted to lots of different things, including legal fees for other issues. Well, how can you justify being reimbursed for $230 million when none of it came out of your pocket to begin with? So that's number one. Number two, if you believe this was a malicious prosecution, well, Marco Rubio has something to say about that, because there are two reasons why he's seeking this money. First, because of the so-called Russia hoax, and two, because of the Jack Smith documents case, where they executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago. Let's go to the so-called Russia hoax. Well, the Mueller report revealed that it was not a hoax. There were many, many contacts, apparently 100 pages worth of contacts between Russia and Trump's campaign. It was not a hoax. Number two, the Senate Intelligence Committee at the time, being chaired by none other than Marco Rubio, currently Secretary of State, found that there were ties between the Trump campaign and Russia, and that Russia did attempt to influence the election. So this was not a hoax. And so that pretty much killed that whole first claim that he deserves money because of Russia. Number two, as far as the search warrant goes, as you know, to get a search warrant, the FBI just doesn't go into your home. They got to go to a judge. They went to a magistrate judge, federal magistrate judge, a guy named Bruce Reinhart, down the street from here in West Palm Beach, and they got him to sign off on it, which means that there is probable cause, that there's evidence of a crime at that location. You can't get compensation for malicious prosecution when a judge signs off on the search warrant, okay? And just, it's preposterous, because none of the stuff that I mentioned, the so-called Russia hoax, the so-called illegal search warrant, none of it gets you paid, because none of it was illegitimate. None of it was malicious.
Yeah. And let me just talk about the nuts and bolts of how these claims are typically made against the federal government. There is this standard federal form. It's called the Form 95. And what that allows people to do is, if they believe they have been injured in some way, personally, financially, reputationally, but really most directly, let me use a easy to understand example. If there is some federal law enforcement agent who is on duty and drives recklessly, let's say he's driving drunk and he runs over an American citizen, well, that person can put in a claim against the federal government because of the negligent, maybe even grossly negligent misconduct of a federal employee or official resulted in injury to the person. They can make a claim for monetary damages. Now, ordinarily, Dave, we both know those claims are almost always denied. Sometimes they're paid out, but they're almost always denied. However, if you want to file a lawsuit against the federal government under the Federal Torts Claims Act, this is a step that you have to undertake. It's kind of a prerequisite. And once your claim is denied,
then you can go into court and sue and try to make your case. So, there is a procedure out there that if you're injured, if you're truly harmed by the wrongful conduct of some federal government agent or employee, you might be able to win your claim. But as you point out, the notion that Donald Trump, who was simply investigated for his crimes, some of which culminated in grand jury indictments, somehow that is negligent, grossly negligent, or even intentional misconduct by government employees and officials is pure effing folly. You point out that in volume 1 of the Trump-Russia report, there were, I believe, 140 contacts documented between Russian officials and the Trump campaign. And as you say, Marco Rubio's committee said, you know what? Russia did try to interfere to Donald Trump's advantage. And then what we don't talk much about, and it may not be directly on topic for purposes of this, $250 million demand Donald Trump is making. Let's not forget volume 2 of the Trump-Russia report found as many as 10 potential felony obstruction of justice crimes committed by Donald Trump. That doesn't feel like a witch hunt, and it sure doesn't feel like Bob Mueller and his team did anything that could be considered negligent or nefarious in trying to injure Donald Trump. And then it gets even wilder because, as you point out, when he talks about literally my privacy interest was violated when they raided Mar-a-Lago, we both know that the work that goes into an application for a search warrant by the FBI that's going to be run through a federal prosecutor, because it has to be approved by a federal prosecutor before they present the application to the judge. I know because I reviewed more applications for search warrants than I could ever count in my career. The work that goes into that is so intense and so detail oriented. And when it comes to searching a place like Mar-a-Lago, the residence of a former president of the United States, that thing was gone through with a fine-tooth comb. And a judge concluded that there was probable cause to believe there was evidence of a crime on the property at Mar-a-Lago, and signed the authorization to go and search. To somehow suggest that, and his words, my privacy was violated, is, it's laughable, but there's nothing funny about it because he's demanding money from the U.S. taxpayers.
Well, his strongest argument in his mind is that the case was dismissed. So he won, and thus he should get paid. But why did he win? He won because Judge Aileen Cannon took an unprecedented step of finding the special counsel statute unconstitutional and shocked everyone in dismissing this case. That, I am certain, would have been overturned on appeal. But before it could be considered on appeal, the Trump DOJ, ordered by Donald Trump, ordered his DOJ to dismiss everything. So that's a win. You get paid for that? And that seems a little self-serving, right? You tell your team to drop a case, and then you say, you see, the case was dropped, I need to get paid. That doesn't work like that.
It almost feels analogous to sending masked marauders into the states to run roughshod over the people's due process rights, constitutional right against an unreasonable search and seizure, creating so much chaos, and then using that chaos as an excuse to send the military into those same streets. I feel a recurring theme, a pattern here in the way Donald Trump has been operating. But now let's talk about this. Because when you talk about the absurdity of Donald Trump ordering his case dismissed and then arguing, my case was dismissed, that proves it wasn't a righteous case against me. Can you talk a little bit about who would be in a position to actually act on this claim that Donald Trump has filed with DOJ?
There are two people at the Department of Justice. The number two person there, Todd Blanche, who was Trump's defense lawyer. So you're saying, pay me and my lawyers for the cost to defend myself in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Oh, by the way, my lawyer is Todd Blanche, who's also the person who's going to be deciding if we get paid. So, excuse me? So, Your Honor, please rule our way because you're one of the parties in this case. So that's exactly what happens. Please decide to pay yourself, and that's why it's so mind-bendingly ridiculous. Like, how can you even think that this is legitimate? And then there's the other person. There's the number three person. Okay, so if he's conflicted out, there's the number three person there, a guy named Stanley Woodward. Stanley Woodward represented Walt Nada. That was one of Trump's employees, his co-defendant in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. So
His
essentially,
indicted co-conspirator. He represented
yes,
his indicted co-conspirator.
that's right. That's right. That is like saying, I don't know. I'm trying to think of an analogy to this. I've never seen this before. You're asking your co-defendant to be the judge in your case, essentially. That's it, because you're asking the people who were in charge of your defense to now make the decision to pay your defense. Come on.
So that is like conflicts 101. You can't have your former lawyer who, and these people are not just Donald Trump's former lawyer and the former lawyer for Donald Trump's indicted co-conspirator, but they also happen to be serving at the pleasure of Donald Trump, which means if they deny his claim, he could summarily fire them. I mean, the conflicts that are presented, again, are so flippin' laughable, but it's okay because I think DOJ issued a statement saying, oh, we're going to pay attention to the potential conflicts. So what we're going to do is go to the chief ethics officer of the Department of Justice, and we'll abide by whatever decision they make about whether we can be involved in, deciding whether we should authorize the payment to Donald Trump. But there's another problem with that, because Pam Bondi in July fired the chief ethics officer for the Department of Justice, and goodness knows who is running that shop now. So any way you turn, there is no righteous way to move through this claim that Donald Trump has filed. But if you had to take a stab at it, if you get your crystal ball out, how do you think this thing is going to play out?
I hate for you to think I'm a Pollyanna, but I think this one has captured the imagination of the public that it's so egregious. The dots being connected are from here to here. You don't have to go into a circle. That I think this one gets pushed off to the side because, quite frankly, Trump doesn't need this kind of money when he's making all this money from Binance and from his crypto coin. I mean, he gave a pardon to the head guy from Binance who had already been let out of jail, but now got the pardon that he desired. And that's the same guy who's been putting many millions of dollars into Trump coins. He's making, really, now he is a multi-billionaire. And I don't think that this, which the public is fixated on, is going to be worth it when he's making a lot more over here. I mean, and also you see, Jared Kushner has business dealings with the Emirates and the Saudis. And so there's a lot more money to be made in foreign policy and Bitcoin than there is in something right in front of us, which is a self-serving deal with the DOJ.
So let me ask you a question that I am forever being asked, and maybe you're better equipped to answer it than I am. It involves civil law. It involves class action lawsuits. And full disclosure, I was a prosecutor my whole professional career. I never tried to put together a class and get it certified. I was never involved in civil litigation. But people are forever asking, Dave, is there nothing the American people can do by way of protecting our rights, protecting our tax dollars, and bringing some kind of a class action lawsuit against the federal government, against Donald Trump? I always defer because I say it's not my area of expertise. And I think there are so many accomplished class action litigators out there that if there was a well-placed, supportable class action lawsuit to be brought, I have to believe they would have brought it. But do you have any thoughts about any of that? Only because I am forever asking and deferring. I feel like I never have a good answer to that question.
I don't have an easy answer either. I think pre Supreme Court immunity decision, you could hold Trump and others accountable for some of the the actions they're taking here. But now, because of the Supreme Court's immunity decision, it makes it so difficult. This has been like a get out of jail free card for Trump and his enablers who have done things that would otherwise have resulted in criminal charges. But now, because we're living in this new era, the Supreme Court has pretty much made it impossible to prosecute a sitting president, let alone a former president. That no. Now, the one good thing that I'll say, because I always try to look at the bright side, is that because Donald Trump will not be facing any criminal prosecution upon leaving office, I do think he leaves office. Actually, I thought that if he was still facing criminal charges, that he would stay in office beyond this term. He would find a way to do it. But because he does not believe he will face any criminal charges because of the Supreme Court's ruling, because he got his DOJ to dismiss the cases against him, and the case in Georgia isn't going anywhere against him, I think he does leave. I do think so. And I know that Steve Bannon is saying he's going to serve a third term, and I think he's trolling us. He's made billions of dollars through his crypto and through foreign contributors that he doesn't need this anymore. After he's done, he's going to go back to Mar-a-Lago, live the high life, and maybe get his son to be president. So I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the glass half full, the glass half empty, or the whole glass is just overturned and spilling all over all of us. But I guess him leaving office would be a good thing whenever that happens. All right. So let me finish up moving away from the horrific news of the day and just do a couple of fun questions. So, you were a public servant for a quarter of a century. I was a Fed for more than 30 years. Let me just ask you, what did you enjoy most about your life as a public servant, and what did you enjoy least?
The part I enjoyed least was the fundraising. I hated fundraising, but you had to do it. People said, so have you learned to like fundraising? I said, well, I mean, fundraising is like breathing. You have to do it. And you try not to think of it as a chore. It's a necessity. And because you want to stay in office, you want to get elected to office. Sadly, money is too important these days, but you have to raise money from people. And I hated that. The part I loved the most was to really have a say in the biggest issues of the day. I mean, when neo-Nazis came into our community and started making life miserable for so many people, I was like, well, I could do something about this. And we prosecuted these guys. They were throwing their disgusting literature on the homes of so many people. And they said, sorry, First Amendment. Yeah, you have the First Amendment, but you don't have the First Amendment right to litter. So actually used a dumping of litter statute. We actually put the leader of the neo-Nazi group behind bars. And after that happened, that group was gone. I mean, it's amazing how someone's attitude will change when they wear a pair of steel bracelets. So I love being involved. And also, for example, when there was an issue involving Trump and Mar-a-Lago, people would call upon me. And I love being in the center of it. I never try to shy away from it. It's like you, I embrace it. And also the other part I loved is to be around people. I really do love people. And I thought the ability to be around people and knowing that my decisions had a real impact on their lives, as opposed to when I was a state senator. When you're in the state Senate, especially in the minority party, as I was, as the Democrat in Florida, but as a state senator, I was 1/40th, because there are 40 state senators, 1/40th of one half of one of three branches of government. And although the senator title was really cool, especially when you're 31 years old, you still don't have a lot of power. When you're state attorney, you're one of one. You have the biggest power that government can offer an elected official, the power to take away someone's freedom. So you need to treat that with the proper humility. And I know you did when you're a federal prosecutor, but I love being state attorney. And I had just done it for 12 years and thought that it's time for a change, a new challenge. And plus, I wanted to try the private sector out. And that gives me a plug. Dave Aronberg Law here in West Palm Beach, a boutique litigation firm. I got married, and my wife and wanted to live in the suburbs and just try a different chapter of our lives.
Yeah. And it's funny when you talk about the remarkable power that a prosecutor has to potentially deprive somebody of their liberty. I mean, that is the weightiest responsibility that I think government officials can have, maybe short of, ordering people to go to war. But I always told my federal homicide prosecutors when I was chief of homicide, never are we more vital in our role, in our responsibilities as a prosecutor, as when we are declining to charge somebody with a crime. Because it can be really hard, as you well know. You want to vindicate the rights of victims. You want to protect the community from folks who would endanger the community. However, you're bound by the facts and the law and the Constitution. And if it's not there, it's not there. And that's why some of the most important decisions we have to make as prosecutors is to decline to charge somebody with a crime if it's not there, or if they have a legitimate defense. And that can make victims, it can make the community very unhappy. But we're not there to make everybody happy. We're there to be loyal to the facts, the law, the Constitution, without fear or favor. And we are now seeing when, prosecutors, and one U.S. attorney in particular, Lindsay Halligan, is completely untethered to the facts, the law, the Constitution, and the ethics that govern our practice. This is what happens. You have baseless, evidence-free, vindictive prosecutions brought. And the one little point of light that I can find in the vindictive prosecution tidal wave that continues to build, it seems, is that I believe these cases are going to fail spectacularly in court.
Great.
And that will expose Donald Trump for the paper tiger he is when it comes to his threats to prosecute people, because he will not be able to do it successfully. Hell, he couldn't keep a comedian off of TV for more than 1 week when he desperately wanted him off TV permanently. What does that tell us? He's not very good at this dictating thing, at least in my opinion.
We prosecutors have our reputation, and when you lose that, it's over. I mean, when John Durham, who had a really good reputation, was appointed by Trump to investigate the so-called Russia hoax, and he came up with almost nothing. He did end up getting one person to plead guilty because he lied on a form, and then he went to trial on 2 others, and this were the big cases. There were such quick acquittals that John Durham's name is now disgraced. I mean, really, he has politicized prosecutions. And although people are saying, these individuals, Lindsay Halligan and others who are doing this, they should be charged themselves. Trump's going to pardon everyone when he leaves. And because of the immunity decision, who knows how far down that goes through the administration? I don't know. But you can never get your reputation back. And Lindsay Halligan, in stepping in as a first-time lawyer, is going to have to live with the consequences of prosecuting people without any facts to get a conviction. It's one thing to go to a grand jury. You can get a grand jury conviction, as they say, with a ham sandwich. But when you try to prosecute the case in front of a real jury, you will get a quick acquittal. And I think that the Lindsay Halligan cases against Letitia James and against James Comey will never even get to a jury. I think that they will be dismissed by the judge as vindictive prosecution. And that is an albatross that she will have to wear around her neck forever, because no prosecutor ever wants to be humiliated like that. When my prosecutors lost cases in front of juries, that's one thing. That's part of it. But when you get a JOA, you know what that is? That's a judgment of acquittal where the judge says, I'm not even letting this go to the jury. That's humiliating. I mean, just think, last thing. John Durham didn't get a JOA. John Durham got quick acquittals. That was embarrassing, humiliating. To get a JOA where the judge doesn't even allow it to get to a jury, I think that's going to be the future of those cases against Letitia James and James Comey.
Yeah, and Lindsay Halligan will wear that albatross around her neck, and she will be headed straight to a bar council investigation for bringing an unethical, vindictive, selective prosecution against Comey, against Letitia James. And, all of this, we have to hang on, and we have to keep having hope and optimism where we can find it, that the courts will hold, the courts will see this for what it is. I agree with you. I don't think these cases get to a jury. I think they are dismissed in motions hearings based on vindictive and selective prosecution. And maybe for the unlawful appointment of Lindsay Halligan, we'll see how that litigation plays out. But like you say, if you don't have your integrity, then you have nothing. And it seems to me Lindsay Halligan, doesn't have much going for her right now. So let me just say thanks for jumping on with us, Dave. Thank you for the work you continue to do besides your private practice. And please tell people where they can find you in your private practice. Again, where else should they look for you other than right here on Substack? You just started your page. Can I please urge all of our Team Justice members to click over as soon as we're done, and please follow, subscribe to Dave's Substack as well?
Thank you. Yeah, I call myself the Florida lawman. I even got that trademarked. I'm very proud of that, actually, because I was told by a trademark attorney that I'll never get that approved through the government. But maybe whoever the examiner was a fan of Morning Joe and approved my trademark. So Florida lawman. And I also am on YouTube. I do videos for Legal AF. Legal AF is an affiliate of the Midas Touch Network, and we focus all on the legal side. And I like the work that we do there. There's some really good contributors. You have Katie Fang, for example. We don't see you there because you have your own shtick going there, Glenn Kirshner, and you've just blown up. So very happy to be on with you and to get the rub, as they say. Where hopefully some of your peeps will come join me, and because justice matters, my friend. It really does.
I've heard that. There's 4 years of high school wood shop put to good use right there. I made that sign with my own two hands. Dave, thank you for jumping on. Maybe we can make this a regular thing once a week or every couple of weeks when you're not too busy with Morning Joe.
Hey, thank you, Glenn Kirshner, too. I appreciate you very much. And yeah, Dave Ehrenberg Law is my law firm, but you know what? My passion is to do this kind of thing with you, Glenn. So let's do it again. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dave. See you, everybody.